Good afternoon to all of you. In monsoon webinar on the behalf of API. In this series, we are happy to have a renowned gastroenterologist of Central India, Dr. Atul Shende. And thanks to Indonit, President Dr. Rajesh Gupta, Secretary Dr. Kankane, Moderator Dr. Bansor, and all unit members of all over the country, all family physicians of all units, and series coordinator Dr. Pragnesh and Janak Shah. I welcome to all of you. Go to Pramod. Pramod, क्या हो गया? Pramod. Hello. Something is wrong. Pragnesh. Something is wrong. I'm audible. I'm audible.
Yeah. Yes, Pramod sir,
Pramod?
go ahead, please.
Yes.
Pramod sir, go ahead.
Go
ahead, please.
Okay.
अरे आवाज आ रही है.
I welcome all of you.
Start.
Okay.
Yes,
I welcome all of you on behalf of FAPI and GPI Indore. And at the beginning, I want to thank Sipla for the technical support. And today, our topic is gastrointestinal diseases in monsoon. And our speaker, Dr. Atul Shende from Indore. Dr. Rajesh Gupta was supposed to give your introduction, but he is not getting the sound. He is not audible. Some problem is there. So Dr. Atul Shende has done MBBS from GMC Bhopal and done MD from MGM Medical College Indore, and then he went for DM to Jaipur. At present, he is assistant professor in MGM Medical College Indore and doing practice in gastroenterology and doing endoscopy also. I welcome Dr. Atul Shende for the lecture.
Thank you. At the outset, I would like to thank all the office bearers, Dr. Bajpayee, Dr. Pragnesh, Dr. Kankane, Dr. Bansod, for giving me an opportunity to interact with the FPAI on this important topic. And as we know that we all are passing through very bad times in our career, in our lives, we are seeing one of the most adverse situations wherein people are dying because of corona, and I hope and pray to God that let us all come out of it hale and hearty. So today I will be speaking on a very interesting topic, which is gastrointestinal diseases in monsoon or rainy season. As you know that now it's the season of rainy season, which is usually following summers. But then when we see this year, as predicted in our part of the country, we are not having that much of rains. Rains along with it brings many other problems, although it's a like tonic to our farmers, as our country is a farmer based economy and we all depend upon farming and farmers because they are the runners of this country's economy. And if the monsoons are poor, the rains are poor, then whole of the economy is affected. But then at some point of time also bring some adverse situations and adverse conditions also to us. Thanks to our administrations and the ongoing Swachhata Abhiyan and various other policies of Government of India, which have actually really brought down the incidence of various rainy season induced or rainy season causing illnesses. And that is why just for a moment, is some technical problem.
सर आप जुड़ गए नहीं सर ऑडियो पे आ गए क्या? अच्छा बस तो सर नहीं, आप ऑडियो चालू करेंगे तो हो जाएगी ना सर ऑडियो पे?
Am I audible now? I am audible.
सर अपन
Yes.
थोड़ा सा
Yes, sir. Please go ahead.
Yeah. So when we come to our clinical practice, when we see you all are the first contact with the society, with the patients, and when you see your patients in your clinic, the most common presentations in the early phase of onset of rainy season are basically divided into two types. One is the rainwater induced, that is waterborne diseases, and others are mosquito-borne diseases. As you know that mosquitoes are vectors for various illnesses which are commonly seen in the rainy season or in the monsoon. So the waterborne diseases which are usually seen in our clinical practice are diarrhea, enteric fever, that is typhoid, viral hepatitis, which are one of the very common occurrences in the month of July, August, September, and then cholera, which is slightly on a decline, and with the Swachhata Abhiyan ongoing, with the construction of various toilets at various places, with almost now like our city, we are proud that we are the cleanest city of India, and it has been declared as free of open field defecation. Cholera is now on a decline. There are various other disorders which are not actually directly transmitted by water, but then they are vector generated, like leptospirosis. Leptospirosis is basically transmitted by the excreta of the mice, and then through the water, this organism it enters into the body and causes illness. The mosquito generated or mosquito induced illnesses are dengue, chikungunya, and malaria, which are on a rise in this season. But when we are seeing and analyzing this year's practice, I am in my clinical practice is seeing that there is a gross decline in viral hepatitis. That is, some contribution is because there are less rains this time, and another contribution is corona. Why corona? Because almost there is a lockdown everywhere. Weekends are locked down in Indore, Madhya Pradesh. We are most of the outside eateries, outside eating places, the thelas and the street foods. They are nowadays absolutely out of fashion. People are not going outside. They are not eating pani puris. They are not eating all the open foods which are dispensed, cut foods, cut fruits, and all those things which are usually eaten by people in the streets. They are absolutely not available nowadays. So at this point of time in our clinical practice, we are seeing very less of viral hepatitis, and this has been a drastic change in our clinical practice this year. We are seeing less of enteric fever, we are seeing less of malaria, less of dengue. By the time in the month of July and August, we are seeing lots and lots of dengue patients over last 2, 3, 4 years. But this year, Corona has really brought down the incidence and prevalence. What we are seeing and the clinical presentation, what I want to emphasize at this point of time for all our colleagues is that people are afraid of going to the health system. This is a big problem. They are not coming to the doctors. They are not going. They are self-treating them at home. They are uh, treating themselves at home, and what is happening, they are now coming to us with complications. Like, you'll not believe, in past 3, 4, 5 weeks I am seeing very serious and sick patients. Like, you will be diagnosing acute appendicitis very easily, just a young person coming to you with right iliac fossa pain, with fever, vomitings, and it's a point diagnosis, is a diagnosis which is made on spot. Patient is having gross tenderness, rebound tenderness in the right iliac fossa, but then these patients, they are taking treatments at home, they are being treated by their home remedies, and then they are coming to us with complications, that is perforated appendicitis. I have, in my last 3, 4 weeks of practice, I am seeing lots of young people coming to me with appendicular perforation, with intestinal perforations, depending on the complications of enteric fever, like, but they are not the system, they are not getting themselves investigated, and henceforth they are coming to the health system only with complications. Just to give a small example, I saw one patient a few days back wherein he was having severe pain in abdomen. He was being shunned off from the gates of the hospital just because he was running high grade fever, 102 fever. Am I audible? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So he was shunned out right from the gates of the hospital because he was having high grade fever. He was having a saturation of 87-88%, and he was having some findings in the radiograph. But then when we evaluate, he turned out to be enteric perforation. So what I want to reiterate at this point of time is that when the patients are coming to you in the community, when they are coming to you, evaluate them thoroughly and critically, because they are hiding their symptoms. They are not telling. If you ask any patient whether you are having cough, you are having fever, they will just deny. They will take crocin, they will take some paracetamol, they will come to you, and when you take their temperatures on infrared thermometers, they are absolutely afebrile. But then they are doing harm to themselves and making difficult times for us because we are not able to diagnose. So let's come to the first complication, that is first disease, that is diarrhea. Diarrhea is like having loose stools. It is classified into acute diarrhea and chronic diarrhea. Acute diarrhea is defined as episodes of multiple loose stools within a duration of less than 14 days. Anything more than 14 days would be labeled as chronic diarrhea. It is a very common occurrence in your practice. I am less into pediatric practice, but you are seeing all pediatric adolescents, young and elderly people. So in your practice, young children's, they are coming to you with diarrhea and they are to be properly investigated. Recently, I think it's not advisable to write acute gastroenteritis on your prescription because it's a notifiable disease, and you should label it as only acute diarrhea. And then we can subclassify it whether it is viral or bacterial or any other cause like amoebic or anything. But then never write acute gastroenteritis on your prescription because it's a notifiable disease. And now the administration becoming very tough on doctors. We have to be very careful before writing such terms on our prescriptions. So always write acute diarrhea, and you can subclassify it as the cause, whichever you make your clinical diagnosis, and then whether it is complicated by dehydration, hypotension, shocks, septicemia, acute kidney injury, or anything else. So diarrhea is the reversal of normal net absorptive status of water and electrolytes, and then there is excessive absorption. Diarrhea can be of excretory type, secretory type, wherein the cyclic AMP pathway in the colon is stimulated by various toxins of cholera or any other bacteria like enterotoxigenic E. coli, enteropathogenic E. coli, or enteroinvasive E. coli, and subsequently these patients will present to you with lot of purging. They may have mild, moderate, or severe dehydrations. So these patients are to be clinically evaluated properly. Look into their skin turgor, look into their blood pressures, look at the pulse, look at systemic signs, because all those patients who have got systemic symptoms or they have some form of element of septicemia, just look and ask for their urine outputs. If their urine outputs are low and they are having hypotension, then these are the candidates who require parenteral supplementation of fluids. The clinical presentations and course of diarrhea therefore depends on the cause and the response of the host towards the organism. So you should always ask for stool characteristics, that is what is the consistency, color, volume and frequency of the stools. You also need to look for the presence of associated enteric symptoms like nausea, vomiting, fever, abdominal pain. If the child or a person is in a daycare setting, if the child is going to some daycare settings, then the usual organisms which we are seeing and which are contagious are rotavirus, astrovirus, and calcivirus induced diarrheas, Campylobacter, Shigella. Shigella, I would say, is always an agent which would require rapid and urgent intervention, and they may even sometimes require admission because it causes rapid enteroinvasive type of infection of small and large bowel, leading to rapid purging, and they can land up in septicemia and acute kidney injury. Giardia and Cryptosporidium are rare occurrences usually seen in very immunocompromised patients. A history of food ingestion, especially the eating of street food, uncooked food, or eating raw foods, should always be asked in their history when we are evaluating a patient of diarrhea. Exposure to swimming pools, exposure to marine environment, a visit to some swimming pools or to some uh, banks of river should always be asked to this patient. Then you need to ask for travel history. Travel history is always very, very important. And as we know that traveler's diarrhea is a very common entity in our clinical practice, which can be uh, usually treated on a OPD basis, but sometimes if patients are coming to us in a very moribund state, then they may be admitted and then subsequently treated. Just to reiterate few small basic teachings which are told to us in our MBBS days, how do we clinically differentiate between a small and large bowel type of diarrhea? Just by appearance, volume. You see, small bowel type of diarrhea is usually voluminous, large stool. They are usually 2 to 3 or max to max 4 in a day, and then they are associated with a frequency of somewhere around 3 to 4 per day. Blood cannot be easily uh, identified, and patient cannot easily identify presence of blood in a small bowel type of diarrhea, because usually if there is a blood loss in the small bowel, then these patients, the stool is mixed with blood, so they are not able to tell. On the contrary, all those patients who are having large bowel type of diarrhea, then they will tell you that, yeah, I'm having frank blood in my stools. There can be hematochezia, then there can be frank blood in their stools. So you can clinically differentiate whether the patient is having small bowel type of diarrhea or large bowel type of diarrhea. There are various organisms also which can be clinically differentiated if the patient is, or if you are clinically evaluating the patient, and then you can also easily make out what are the organisms which affect the small bowel and which are the organisms which affect the large bowel. So you can treat all those patients who are having small bowel type of diarrhea on the basis that they are having simple viral infections like rotaviral diarrhea, adenovirus, or other viral illnesses. On the contrary, large bowel is usually affected by invasive bacteria like Shigella, Salmonella, Campylobacter, and E. coli. So this is just an overview wherein to tell that how can you clinically make a diagnosis of small and large bowel type of diarrhea. The patient can usually come to us with gross dehydration or mild to moderate dehydration. You have to look into the capillary refill, look for the skin turgor, look for sunken eyes, lack of tears, and then always a blood pressure monitoring abdominal pain which is diffuse in nature with some amount of guarding and tenderness across whole of the abdomen. Patient can be having renal rashes as well. So how do you make a diagnosis of diarrhea? It's usually a clinical diagnosis, but then you can supplement various tests. You can ask for certain routine testing to look for the most important test which should be ordered in patient who seems to be in moderate to severe dehydration is a complete blood count, CBC. That is very important, which will tell you platelet counts, WBC counts. Shift to the left, that is the patient, whether patient is progressing towards toxemia and septicemia. So you should always look for leukocyte counts, and at the same point of time get them these electrolytes. Electrolytes are very important. If patient is having coming to you with history of diarrhea and now his abdomen is distended, on the contrary, it suggests that patient is having either have severe hyponatremia or hypokalemia, which has led to ileus, and the patient is having distension of abdomen. So always get them their creatinine as well, because if patient is having early acute kidney injury, he will always require admission and subsequently fluid replenishment, and then subsequently he may sometimes land up in severe acute kidney injury, wherein they may also require dialysis to salvage from their acute kidney injury. Uh, Tests to diagnose various organisms are usually not warranted in our clinical practice. It is only that we have to keep in mind whether we are not dealing with severe forms of infections, that is Vibrio cholera, Shigella, Salmonella, that is enteric fever, which would require appropriate duration of therapy. Not that we have made a diagnosis of rotaviral diarrhea and the patient turns out to be a bacterial diarrhea, and these patients may progress to further complication. So the hallmark and the cornerstone of therapy for management of diarrhea, as everybody knows, is oral rehydration therapy. That is supplementing the government supplied or commercially available ORS solutions which are easily available. I would only highlight essential clinical take-home messages which are pertinent, as you all have huge experiences in your career. I need not to reiterate what are the antibiotics which are used, what are the drugs which are drug of choice, but then I would only my role would be to tell you what are the take-home message and what are the usual mistakes which we do in our clinical practice. Like most of the times I see in my clinical practice, people are coming from periphery. When they come to us, they are having IBS. So what happens actually, patients give pressure on us. They tell us, साहब 10 दिन नहीं रुक रहा है, साहब 10 दिन नहीं रुक रहा है, and they are on your head, banging your head, साहब टटिया नहीं रुक रही, 10 दिन नहीं रुक रहा है. So you are also under stress that it is a, we all say in our clinical practice, like if a patient come to you, उसके सिम्टम्स 10-10 15-15 दिन के होंगे, लेकिन यदि आपने उसके 24 घंटे में उसका बुखार कम नहीं किया या उसके दस्त बंद नहीं किए, तो वो पेशेंट आपसे नाराज हो जाता है. So it's a usual pressure on our side that the attendants, they are always reiterating, साहब दस्त ही बंद नहीं हो रहा है. So sometimes we get very much irritated and we write drugs like diphenoxylate, Ridol and Imodium and all those antidiarrheal drugs. But actually we should tell them, we should just give 4, 5, 6, 10 minutes to these attendants and tell them what is the actual scientific way to treat diarrhea. We cannot bring down the frequency of diarrhea from 15 to 2 in 24 hours. It is always not warranted to stop stools immediately. And you should tell them frankly that we are not magicians, we are not jadugars, that we can bring down their diarrhea from a frequency of 15 to 2 in a day. And that's going to harm them. So you tell them, just give 5 minutes. I tell them कि देखो ऐसा है, यदि आप 2 मिनट में बंद कर देते हो, मैं अभी भी 2 मिनट में डाटा लगा सकता हूँ आपके लेटरिन में, लेकिन इससे आपको नुकसान होने वाला है. इससे क्या होगा, जो आपके आंतों के अंदर बैक्टीरिया है, जो आपके आंतों के अंदर टॉक्सिन्स हैं बैक्टीरिया के, वो सब आपके बॉडी में एब्जॉर्ब होने वाले हैं. और जब वो बॉडी में एब्जॉर्ब होंगे तो आपको सेप्टिसीमिया हो सकता है, किडनी खराब हो सकती है, किडनी फेल हो सकती है, और आपको और सीरियस. तो आप दस्त जाने से मत रुकिए, आप अस्पताल में हैं, आपके शरीर में एक संतुलित वे में हम आपको आईवी फ्लूइड्स, इंट्रावेनस फ्लूइड्स दिए जा रहे हैं, जिससे आपका ब्लड प्रेशर कम नहीं होगा, आपकी किडनी का भी ख्याल रखा जा रहा है. सो यू जस्ट गिव देम अश्योरेंस एंड दे विल be assured that you are fully involved in their case, not that just writing a diphenoxylate, a tablet of Ridol to bring down the frequency, or sometimes we see patients are taking 4-4-5-5 tablets of antidiarrheal agents. That is a wrong practice which always should be discouraged in all clinical practice. Then depending upon the spectrum of diarrhea, when you see that whether the patient is having small bowel type of diarrhea, definitely quinolones and third generation oral cephalosporins would be a good choice to manage these patients on OPD basis. But if they need admission, you can give quinolones, you can give imidazoles in form of tinidazole or metronidazole, and then subsequently you can order for certain investigations as well. Various societies, European Society of Parenteral Nutrition and Pediatric Infectious Disease Society, they are all probiotics. These are very good agents to manage traveler's diarrhea, infectious diarrhea, antibiotic associated diarrhea, diarrhea in ICU. Probiotics may be an effective adjunct to the management of diarrhea. However, because there is no evidence of efficacy for many preparations, we suggest the use of probiotic strains with proven efficacy. So what is important is that ORS would always be the cornerstone. On such forums, I am usually asked a question that सब एंटीबायोटिक को प्रोबायोटिक के साथ हम लोग कंबाइन कर सकते हैं क्या? So technically speaking, definitely you should never club a probiotic with an antibiotic because scientifically it's not rendered. In such situation, if you give probiotics, then definitely fungal based, that is Saccharomyces boulardii, would be probiotic choice when you need to club probiotic and antibiotic. So there are very strain specific and the mother culture of the bacteria, the organism or the probiotics which you are selecting while you are treating a patient is very, very important. Always take a probiotics which can be in combination, which can be having synergistic action, and their mother culture would be always very, very important because they should not undergo genetic mutations, they should not be having any detrimental effect, they should not have resistant potential. So such probiotics can be selected in your clinical practice when you are writing probiotics. So vast majority of published data and trials are available now with us, showing the role of probiotics, and especially now we are very commonly using probiotics in acute watery diarrhea, which is caused by bacteria, viruses, and antibiotic-associated diarrhea, which are caused by Clostridium difficile, that is pseudomembranous colitis, sporadic infectious diarrheas, and prevention of diarrheas as well. So there are various preparations which are available, but then certain preparations which have very definite formulations which ensure that there will be no genetic mutations, there will be no specific resistance. These agents should be used in your clinical practice. Now coming to the second important entity is viral hepatitis. In this season, as you know, that people are in the habit that chalo aaj barish ho rahi hai, sab pakode banaye jaye, and then people, they will have alcohol, they will have drinks, they will have a lot of spicy foodies, pakodis, samosas, bhajiyas, and usually they also club it with alcohol. And sometimes we see that people are also taking some drugs inadvertently for various other reasons, some over-the-counter medication, then they can land up with even drug-induced liver injury. So viral hepatitis, which we commonly see, that is the waterborne illnesses which are documented sources. And in our clinical practice, usually in India, that is common because there is contamination of the water sources, sewer lines, and although now with Swachhata Abhiyan, there is one filtration cities.
Sir, can I interrupt you for a moment, sir? Sir, if you can speak bit louder, sir. Thank you.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Slides here. Sure. Yeah. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Hello? Yeah. Sorry for the interruption. There was something. So hepatitis A and hepatitis E, these are the waterborne viruses, wherein there is contamination of the drinking water with the this slides. So when we see, we are living in a tropical country, and if you see this A and E, we come under the high area, that is the Sub-Sahara, South America, and Southeast Asia. We are the countries which are having most worst forms of sanitization and sanitary facilities which are available to the population. So we are always predisposed, and the presentation of viral hepatitis, as you know, SGOT, that is transaminases, to a full-blown fulminant hepatic failure, wherein even 0.1% of patients, they may progress to transplantation. These are potentially, as we were discussing few days back among our faculty, that you see there is no vaccination available for hepatitis E till now, and we see so many patients of hepatitis E in every rainy season. Although hepatitis A has, but these RNA viruses, just like HCV, HIV, Corona, HEV, these are RNA viruses, and they are very fastidious organisms. They are very redundant, and henceforth the development of vaccines for these viruses is very, very difficult. So the recognition of early symptoms of viral hepatitis is very, very important. If a patients come to you with recurrent bouts of nausea, vomitings, inability to eat, and all prodromal features, that is myalgia, fever, body ache, then always look for and advise at least liver function test, wherein you can pick up early viral hepatitis before the icteric phase, that is when the patient becomes jaundiced. So these patients usually will come with prodromal symptoms, and they have recurrent nausea, vomiting, myalgias, body pains. So when you see such patients, the first test you order is obviously will include SGOT, SGPT, serum bilirubin, gamma GT, alkaline phosphatase. And at the same point of time, nowadays patients are also eager and their parents ask, "Isa PVR kaise ho gaya?" So you can order for the various viral markers, that is IgG, and if the patient has some history of parental exposure of blood or blood products in the recent past, or surgery in the recent past, even IgM-anti HBC, that is early antibody for hepatitis B virus, can also be ordered. So other tests for RT-PCR and feces, they are not usually routinely advisable in clinical practice. As I said, that immunization facilities are available only for hepatitis A, and they should always be ordered in certain subset of patients, that is all those people who are coming from Western nation to us, America, Europe, all HIV positive patients, all IV drug abusers, all those patients who are on pipeline to be candidates for liver transplantation, they should always be advised vaccination for hepatitis A. And I think you all might be asking your young pediatric patients and all those children who are going abroad for their studies for hepatitis A vaccination. Enteric fever, this is again a very bread and butter for doctors. Very early recognition is also very important in this disease, because we are in very common practice to order Vidal test. Vidal is a very fancy test which I think every person orders whenever a person comes to you with fever. And at this point of time, when patient is having fever, we order. But the clinical tips and take-home message is that typhoid Vidal test should be ordered only when the fever is more than 7 days, because the Vidal test would come positive only when the patient is 7 days down the line of his illness. The earliest test which would diagnose typhoid would be IgM antibody towards Salmonella typhi. And many times I tell my patients that they are even not having fever, but they come to you, sab bukhar aa raha hai, you test them, there is no fever, and they are running here and there with Vidal reports in titers of 1:80, 1:160, and they say that मुझे तो सब बुखार आ रहा है, बुखार आ रहा है. But then you will have to again counsel these patients कि आपको टाइफाइड नहीं है, यदि आपको साल्मोनेला या साल्मोनेला टाइफीज के जैसे ही दूसरे साल्मोनेला से इन्फेक्शन है, तो उसकी वजह से आपके शरीर में उसके अगेंस्ट एंटीबॉडी बनेंगी, और एंटीबॉडीज कई दिनों तक रक्त में रह सकती है, जिसकी वजह से Vidal test has clinical significance only when it is coming positive in rising titers and patient is symptomatic. He is running high grade fever at a period of 1 week, 2 weeks, and 3 weeks. And by the third week, patient usually will come to you with various complications, like either patient can come to you with ileus, patient can come to you with enteric perforation of the small intestine. So the take home message while treating enteric fever is that properly look into the tests, properly order the test. In the outset, you should always ask for routine CBCs, blood cultures, and IgM typhi check, which would tell you that patient is suffering from enteric fever. Everybody knows the various symptoms of enteric fever, and we should ask our patients to get done the investigations, evaluate them properly, and subsequently look into the various complications in the second and third week of illness, which are seen in patients of enteric fever, and if required, invasive investigations can also be ordered. The antibiotics which we commonly use in our clinical practice and WHO certified, that is oral cefixime in combination with azithromycin, are the them aggressively. In my clinic and various other higher quinolones, and
Hello. Sir, any problem? Avadne, I think sir has by mistake he has left the meeting, I guess.
Yes, sir has rejoined the meeting.
Something is wrong, I think. What
Yes,
happened?
I think sir is by mistake. I think he has left the meeting, I guess.
I think so. Is it? No. Why? Why he left him? I don't know.
Sir, आप उनसे बात करिए. By the time, let's wait. Let him rejoin. So, the Pramod Saab and Kankane Saab, by the time he joins, let's discuss something among us. अगर जब तक वो join करते हैं, sir. Yes, sir. Kankane साहब, हम जानते हैं कि सर आते हैं तब तक हम लोग थोड़ा डिस्कस करते हैं, सर.
Yes, sir.
सर, आप जानते हैं कि हाउ अबाउट योर एक्सपीरियंस विद एडल्ट वैक्सीनेशन? कितने एडल्ट्स टाइफाइड की वैक्सीन के लिए तैयार होते हैं, सर, नॉर्मली?
एक्चुअली सर उनको थोड़ा सा जो है यानी समझाइश देना पड़ती है, जाके फिर वो तैयार होते हैं.
ओके. और पीडियाट्रिक्स में आई थिंक वैक्सीनेशन इसी लोग जल्दी ले लेते हैं, सर.
हाँ सर, डेफिनेटली. पीडियाट्रिक्स तो उनको मतलब दे देते हैं और वो लोग इजीली मतलब उनको वैक्सीनेशन हो जाता है.
Okay. Pramod Saab, somebody has mentioned कि blood culture in the first week is gold standard. So, do we family physician routinely practice such asking for blood culture in routine, sir?
Hello. हाँ सर, क्या हुआ?
हाँ प्रमोद साहब.
हेलो सर, क्या
No.
हुआ? हाँ, मैं डॉक्टर बात की, बोलो क्या हुआ सर?
People don't go for blood culture.
हाँ, लाइट चली गई हैं?
हाँ प्रमोद सर, आप चालू रखिए. बाजपेयी साहब, आपको म्यूट कर दिए. एडमिन प्लीज म्यूट डॉक्टर बाजपेयी प्लीज.
अरे लाइट चलेगी सर. मैं सर लाइट चलेगी डॉक्टर संडे के यहाँ पे, इसलिए मैं बता रहा हूँ आपको.
ठीक है सर, कोई बात नहीं. तो ही शुड बी ज्वाइनिंग इन कपल ऑफ मिनट्स. क्या लगता है सर आपको?
यस ही विल ज्वाइन. लाइट चलेगी इसलिए वो चले गए.
Okay, let's keep the discussion on. I'm asking question to Dr. Pramod. Sir, what is your routine practice? Are you advising blood culture in routine in patient of suspected
No.
typhoid?
No.
Yes, sir.
No.
Okay, then what is your basis of diagnosis? आप Vidal करवाते हैं क्या? Do you ask for serum Vidal?
Yes, we go for Vidal.
Okay, and what is the best time to go for Vidal test, sir?
After 8 days.
After 8
8
days.
days of fever. Yes.
But by and large, sir, what we have experienced in our practice is that the patients, they themselves either start taking antibiotic or somebody else give them antibiotic. So it becomes difficult to interpret. What is your experience? What is your experience about that, sir?
ऐसा तो नहीं, patient don't start on their own. We
Okay.
advise and then they start.
Okay.
I am very comfortable with moxifloxacin in typhoid.
Okay. Gupta sir, what is your Rajesh bhai? What is your this thing view about relapse of typhoid? How many relapses? How common do you see relapse of typhoid? Dr. Rajesh bhai, I think you are not audible.
He is not audible.
Relapse is very common nowadays.
Hello.
Yes, Bajpai sir.
Relapse is very common. So many times patient come, आता है, कुछ दवा लेता है, चला जाता है. That's why he get relapse.
Okay. Yes, Senator sir, you can continue and start sharing your presentation.
Yeah, you're right.
We are just discussing on the same topic. We were discussing about vaccine and relapse and Vidal test and everything.
Yeah, right. Sir, sorry for the interruption.
No, it's fine, sir.
Yeah. So in complicated cases, definitely we need to treat with
सर आपका स्लाइड अभी नहीं आया है।
हाँ यस, जस्ट
हम लोग सर ये डिस्कस कर रहे थे कि अभी क्या है, बहुत कॉमन है कि लोग 8 दिन विडाल के लिए पीपल डोंट वेट, दे जंप ऑन स्टार्टिंग एंटीबायोटिक।
absolutely sir, definitely.
Yes, sir.
It's a very very common problem. People start
Yes.
off with antibiotic, we don't stop, and even blood cultures nowadays in early period are not positive, so we are again in a fix. Patient also bangs our head ki kya nikla, and then we are on the fix, so we are like pressurized to start antibiotic, and at some point of time we have to start some of the other antibiotics. So
Yes,
uh,
yes.
definitely it's a big clinical problem which we face in our practice. So
Yes, sir.
now
Yeah, please go ahead, sir.
yeah, thank you sir. So whenever these patients, they are coming to us with some or the other complication, like if the patient is having enteric perforations, in my clinical practice I have started making a rule or a protocol that we take it as resistant enteric fever, because these patients, they have already received some or the other antibiotics in the periphery, so they come to us with complication and we treat them very aggressively at the outset, because if they are coming with enteric perforations, they are to be subjected to emergency surgeries, and if the albumin levels are very low, the wound healing is very poor, and these patients are destined to have other complications as well, like they sometimes may have leak or fecal fistulas. So it is very very important to start very effective and early antibiotics, and cultures are available usually after 48-72 hours. So that is a big problem in our clinical practice. I per se have now started using again clonazepam, and we have got as usual gratifying and very satisfactory results with usage of chloramphenicol. Even we have used some basic antibiotics which were never used, like even people, they are coming to us with chronic diarrheas, but just a short course of uh, trimethoprim sulfamethoxazole would have wonderful results. Even vaccines are now available for enteric fever, and they can be administered to children and young adults who are going to some high risk areas. Leptospirosis, this is a common, not a very common illness in our part of the country, but of late we have been seeing leptospirosis and diagnosing leptospirosis when the presentation is hepatorenal. People practicing in Kerala or South and Mumbai, they have very good exposure to this illness, that is leptospira, also known as Weil's disease. It is basically transmitted by the excreta of the mice, and patient has very, you see, most of the illnesses like malaria, dengue, leptospira, they will have hepatorenal involvement at some point of time. Even hepatitis E. Yesterday only I saw one young boy came with severe abdominal pain. He had no fever, nothing. And when I investigated, saw him clinically, saw him, patient was having deep jaundice, but he was complaining of severe abdominal pain. And incidentally, uh, one of my colleagues, he had already sent amylase and lipase, and his lipase was somewhere in the tune of 4,000. So we made a diagnosis of acute pancreatitis. But then when I clinically saw him, patient was deeply jaundiced. Sonography was showing only bright liver, but then there was no stone in the CBD. So there was no element of obstruction. So we, and there was no prodromal symptoms. But today morning, his reports came that he is having SGOTPT in the range of thousands, hepatitis E is positive. So hepatitis E is known to cause pancreatitis as well as hepatitis. So wherever we see hepatorenal involvements, that is involvement of kidney and liver, we should always suspect, and complications, we should always suspect malaria, we should suspect typhoid, we should suspect leptospirosis, dengue. So the common clinical presentations of leptospirosis are patient come with very high grade fevers, severe headaches are hallmarks. Retroorbital severe headaches are very hallmark of leptospirosis. Patients have muscle aches, vomitings, jaundice, and red eyes, and subsequently they may have rash, thrombocytopenia, and they subsequently land up with acute kidney injury. Usually the high prevalence areas in our country are Tamil Nadu, Maharashtra, Kerala, but nowadays, especially from the forest areas, these patients are coming, wherein the affliction of mice is more, and because there are lots of warehouses in the periphery of Indore, we are seeing coming patients coming from the small suburban towns nearby Indore. They are coming with classical presentations of leptospira, and then we are diagnosing them. The treatment of usually the investigation which is order is IgM antibody for leptospira, which is positive in very early 24, 48 to 72 hours. And then for very milder cases, the drug of choice are doxycycline, ampicillin, and amoxicillin. For severe hospitalized patient, third generation cephalosporin in form of ceftriaxone and ciprofloxacin are having gratifying results, but sometimes we have to resort to intravenous use of penicillin, which is now very seldom used. Malaria is to be discussed on every such forum when we are seeing diseases in monsoon and rainy season. Everybody knows the presentation, need not to go through all those things, fever with high grade chills and rigors. But my only point here was to reiterate some, I need not to put this slide in a presentation of GI manifestation, but just to reiterate that jaundice, thrombocytopenia, and diarrhea can be presentations of malaria. That's why I flashed this slide on this presentation. So basically, I wanted to conclude my talk and just give a small overview that be cautious, be very safe, practice very safely in current times with all precautions, because patients are also coming with GI manifestations of COVID. COVID is involving gastrointestinal tract in almost 52% of patients, and the usual presentations are diarrhea, abdominal pain, nausea, loss of taste, and I have seen 2 cases. They have come with bloody diarrhea, and even 1 case of pancreatitis. We know that we have lost one of the eminent surgeons of our town. He had pancreatitis in his illness due to COVID, and pancreatitis is also a presentation of corona. So don't forget at this point of time, if a patient is coming to with GI manifestations, keep corona as well in your differential diagnosis, because this is a notorious virus which is causing other organ involvement as well, like encephalitis, myocarditis, acute kidney injury, and GI manifestations. So always keep in point and keep in mind that you should always keep yourself safe. Take proper precautions while you are seeing such patients who are having loss of taste, nausea, loose motions. They can be manifestations of COVID illness as well. So finally, I would like to conclude by saying that you should ask your patients to have safe food, avoid eating outside. There should be proper sanitation, proper disposal of the waste, and be cautious in treating diarrhea. And timely management of diarrhea gives gratifying and excellent results. Vaccines are available for various illnesses like hepatitis A, rotavirus, and typhoid, and they can always be counseled to take these vaccines in pre-monsoon period, so that they are protected by whenever they are exposed to such infections. And I thank you so much. Enjoy the rainy season responsibly. That is the only message from my side. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir.
Sir, we have got a couple of
Very good.
questions. Yes, Baswanta.
Very good lecture. Definitely useful for general practitioners. There is a question which lactobacillus to be used.
Probiotic.
Probiotic.
Lactobacillus, if you ask me regarding lactobacillus specifically, then definitely Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG has a very strong bulky literature now in its favor, because it has shown gratifying results in diarrheas, and another very important entity, that is idiopathic intestinal colics and infantile colics, wherein it is acting on the various pain percepting receptors of the small intestine. And when you give Lactobacillus rhamnosus GG, then pain receptors are also handled, and there are gratifying results. Other than management of diarrhea, pain is also improved. We say they are just matter of semantics. You have to select probiotics on various parameters, because you have to look for the mother culture, you have to look at the efficacy, you have to look what is the form in which you are giving, because if you are giving in form of bacteria, the amount of viable bacteria which is reaching the small intestine is very less. But if you are giving them in form of spores, vegetative spores which go and germinate in the small intestine, then the amount of healthy bacteria which you are delivering to the gut microbiome will be robust. And then the stability of the preparation is very, very important, whether the cold chain was properly maintained or not when the probiotic was taken and was administered. So there are very many important considerations which are to be always taken when you are writing a probiotic to a patient.
In typhoid and enteric fever, azithromycin, cefixime. Besides them, can we use levofloxacin, moxifloxacin?
Yeah, there is literature and there have been studies for usage of other quinolones, but they are not very clinically significant. Their results are not very good. But levofloxacin, definitely, I have tried in my clinic practice. Data also suggest usage of levofloxacin. Moxifloxacin, I have not used in my clinical practice, but data suggests that these quinolones which are less used can be used by us in management of enteric fever.
Are you using chloramphenicol nowadays?
Yes.
Yeah, definitely. I'm using chloramphenicol. Chloramphenicol is giving wonderful results. All those patients wherein we cannot wait too much because these patients, when complicated, they slip out and they die off. So we cannot wait because the defervescence usually occurs 48 to 72 hours after starting, and patients they want early resolution of fever. But even after giving chloramphenicol, the defervescence comes and the fever touches baseline somewhere around 48 to 72 hours. So I, in my clinical practice, all those patients who have not achieved defervescence after starting ceftriaxone or starting cefixime and azithromycin, I would switch over to chloramphenicol as soon as possible.
Is there any question from our?
Yes, sir. I would like to ask one. Atul sir, as we all know, the season of COVID is going on, and COVID is giving, COVID is presenting with a lot of GI manifestations.
Yes.
Now, for a challenge for a family physician like us, कि we don't know कि उसको पकड़े खाया इसलिए उसको डायरिया हुआ है कि he is having the signs of COVID उसके कारण उसको डायरिया. So, is there any silent points which you can give some tips that how can we differentiate among them?
Sir, this is a very, very good question. I would always appreciate because you cannot, there are no clinical signs and symptoms which will differentiate whether we are seeing a COVID-induced diarrhea or where we are seeing other bacterial or viral diarrheas, because only thing or the only hallmark or only pathognomonic feature which you can ask is loss of taste sensation and loss of anosmia, that is loss of smell. These are two very cardinal features which are associated with COVID diarrhea. But
Yes.
otherwise, the diarrhea is usually as similar to that of any other bacterial or viral diarrhea. Patient are having watery diarrhea. The patient come, two staff members of my hospital, they came to me with classical bacterial viral diarrhea. I gave them quinolones at the outset, but they were not responding. Then one fine day she said that सब मेरे को सूंघने में परेशानी हो रही, मुझे कुछ खुशबू नहीं आ रही है, मैं आज सुबह चाय पी रही थी तो मुझे ऐसा लग रहा था आई वाज ड्रिंकिंग जस्ट वाटर, सो आई जस्ट ऑर्डर नहीं इसका कोविड कराइए, and that turned out to be strongly positive. So clinically, by palpation, by any other entity you cannot make, but at this point of time I would tell everybody that you should see every patient in perspective of corona, be it any presentation, be it fever, be it GI manifestation, be it respiratory manifestation. I have caught so many patients of COVID in last 4 months, and they have come to me for various GI manifestations. But when you start speaking to them, they are not even able to speak one single sentence without a break. So that tells that patient, and you just check the pulse oximeter, their saturations are 84, 85%. You get done their x-rays, whole of the lungs are white. So every patient should be keeping corona in thought, because we all are at risk of acquiring. So every patient should be properly evaluated and keep corona in every differential diagnosis. that is the take-home message at this point of time.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. No question.
Thank
More
you.
question from my side.
Any other question?
Dr. Bajpayee? No.
Yes, sir.
You want?
No, very well defined. No question.
Very well. Very good lecture. In fact, I'll ask Dr. O.P. Kankane for vote of thanks. Unmute. Please unmute it. Unmute.
हेलो,
हाँ,
Hello.
आवाज आई सर?
आ रही.
Thank you, sir. I would like to thank Dr. Atul Sande ji for sharing his expertise on the gastrointestinal problem monsoon. I believe the information given by Dr. Atul will help us, our doctors, community in day-to-day practice. I would also like to appreciate FFPI President Dr. R.K. Bajpayee, Secretary Dr. Janik Sai, Co-Ordinator of Monsoon Series Webinar Dr. Pragnesh Bacharjani, Indore GPA President Dr. Rajesh Gupta, Moderator Dr. Pramod Bansal, and all doctors associated all units of FFPI for active participation. Special thanks to scientific partner of FFPI, Cipla company, for making this session possible. Again, thanks to all. आप सभी स्वस्थ रहें, ऐसी मेरी शुभकामनाएं हैं. Good evening.
Thank you, Kankane sir. Thank you, delegates. Thank you, Dr. Atul ji, for joining. And before we just leave, would like to announce that on next Thursday, we'll be having a very interesting session on fever in monsoon. So we'll be covering the common diseases that are common fever that are very common in monsoon, that is malaria, dengue, and vector-borne diseases and other fever. So please do join us at 4 p.m. sharp. Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Have a great time. Bye. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
you.
Thank you.